distinguished participants, in the scope of MARUF21 Marmara Urban Forum, we are organizing this session entitled Alternatives to the Region. You are all welcome. In this session, we are going to deal with the Marmara region from different perspectives, and we are going to create a framework in order to form the future of the Marmara region under new circumstances. In this session, we are going to have three very distinguished academics. They will be presenting in this session. In this session, our speakers, the first speaker is Ferhan Gezici, professor. They will be making a presentation entitled A Look to the Marmara from the Regional Economy Perspective. Erkan Polat will be delivering a presentation called The Region and Rethinking the Borders of the Region. And Ms. Özlem Altınkaya will be discussing Marmara region from the perspective of the history of urban planning. I would like to make an introduction before starting with the presentations, and actually, I'm going to prepare the base for this session's discussions with a short, brief information. Marmara region is creating half of the economy of Turkey. It's a region where the whole economy of Turkey is focused, and it's also Turkey's area of integration with the world economy. Such an intensification gives us many opportunities as well as many problems. In this picture, if you look at the graphs in this region, these are the provinces with the highest level of income. However, on the other hand, in some regions, in cities of Marmara region, the poverty can be visible. I have to underline that Istanbul is receiving the highest level of income. In Marmara region is a bundle of opportunities and problems. Starting from 1920s, in national policies, and since the 1960s, in the regional policies and plans, we are trying to guide and formulate the future of Marmara region. Indeed, when we are investigating the development process of Marmara region, we can think about three periods of general economic and social policies. If I briefly mention these three stages between 1930 and 1970, nation states and social welfare state period. In this period, the public made direct investment, and with special decisions, regional development was guided and steered. Between 1980 and 2000, it was the age of globalization and competition-oriented regional policies period. The role of the public was going down, and for regional development, resources were minimized. In order to increase the competitiveness of the region, there was a limited demand of support. The local actors of regional developments were increased, and the production regions were innovation regions. Global cities became more important. After 2000 and 2020, neoliberal policies were differentiated, where the regions stayed in the background and the cities came to the forefront. These three regions have important reflections on the Marmara region. The right usage of resources in Marmara region is very important, and starting from the Eastern Marmara Regional Plan, all of these were focused on making the balances in the region. In the aftermath of 1980, the task assigned to Marmara region was to become a focal point in articulating to the global economy and ensuring the integration with the international world. And in the Marmara region, this was important on the internal dynamics of Marmara region. However, in the most recent period up until 2020, it is the post-neoliberalism period. In the policies were focused on Istanbul rather than Marmara region. Real estate and finance markets became more important in this new approach, and infrastructure projects formed a new populist approach. These are the new approaches, and this changed the dynamics. After 2020, it's the beginning of a new period, new era, and actually starting from 2019 pandemic, and before that there was a crisis period, and this required a new approach and perspective. In 2020, in the aftermath of 2020, the priority subjects were green economy and a tendency for green digitalization, effective health services, economic, social, and spatial structure resilient to unexpected developments, and a more egalitarian society. In our approach to Marmara region, we need to underline these titles. Now, the automation of the production actually changed the positioning of the production locations. Artificial intelligence got more common in every field, and the production spaces changed, and the way of working, the way of labor, the method of working has changed. Public services and the services of the private sector were digitalized with smart cities, smart regions, smart specialization. Actually, a different economic structure was introduced compared to the conventional economic structure. Energy avoidance and green agenda has brought us away from the conventional perspectives, and innovative approach was necessary. There is a change, but it caused inequalities, and the share of the workforce from the income was declining, unemployment, and there was an inconsistency between the economic conditions and the constructed built environment. The dynamics of Marmara region will be affected from these new circumstances. And in this case, actually, an alternative viewpoint is necessary for the region. Not as it is the case in the past. This is not only about the tendencies from past, but this is actually about how these tendencies will be formed in the new circumstances. And we need a new approach which internalize the changes. In this session, three presenters will present us with some frameworks, and they are about the these kind of changes, what they are, and what kind of changes are expecting us. And hopefully, after these presentations, if we have a chance, we will have a discussion. So I would like to leave the floor to Professor Ferhan. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ms. Eraydın, Professor Eraydın. I would like to start my speech by thanking Marmara Union of Municipalities for organizing such a session and inviting us. And I would like to share my screen. Koptum. I would like to share with you the framework that I'm going to share my presentation. My task in this framework is actually the perspective of regional economy to Marmara region and trying to understand, and we need an analytic approach for the whole Marmara region, sub-regions. What can we tell out of the general economic data? As we all know, Istanbul has a leading role in the Marmara region, and there's an issue of in-region relationship. And what can we say about the future? That will be the framework of my presentation. Actually, in the opening speech of Professor Ayda gave me some hints about my presentation. She divided the approaches to the region and development of Marmara into different periods. I am investigating these periods starting from the most recent period. And if you ask me the reason why, because the most recent period, the beginning of the 21st century, was important, but there are important breaking points. Marmara region is critically important for Turkey, but since in 1999, there was a very huge earthquake which shook this region. Excuse me, Professor, we cannot see your PowerPoint presentation. Would you like to try sharing it again? Oh, is this the case? Why is that? As I said, in the most recent period, in the neoliberal policies differentiating during the 2000s, but before that there was an earthquake which shook the region in 1999 and which was followed by 2001 economic crisis, and today in 2020 throughout the world there was an impact of the pandemic which stopped the economies. And along with that, this year, we are experiencing an environmental problem, which is mucilage. And this issue is occurring as a result of accumulation. Marmara region is an accumulation area for the population and economic activities, and this issue of mucilage came to existence as a result of all those activities throughout the years. It's not occurring just in one day. And the Marmara region's weight in this country has changed in terms of population and income, gross domestic product. And there is an increase in both subjects. And this is actually the explanation of the environmental problems that we encounter. In terms of population, 32% of the country population is in Marmara Region. As you all know, the development agencies have level 2 regions, and the geographical information of the Marmara region has changed, and now we are talking about 15 million people, and the share of income is almost half of the Turkey, which has reached to 47%. The population, in terms of population, it's important for the cumulative economies. If we set aside Istanbul, the most important, the leading city in Istanbul, is the leading city in the region is Istanbul. But apart from Istanbul, there are 5 cities with a population higher than 1 million. And for the other cities, the populations are around 200,000 and 300,000. We are not expecting a homogeneous situation with regards to the population, but we see that throughout time it has changed a lot. The economic indicators, gross domestic product, is going up along with the population in the region, that it has a huge impact in terms of economy. Since the beginning of the 2000s, this gap is opening significantly, and that is what we can understand from the graph on the left side. This gap is growing significantly. What's the reason why this gap is growing? Starting from 2000s, but during the 80s, the globalization in the world, and along with that, international distribution of work, change of production processes, affected Turkey's economy as well as other countries, and this is reflected in the most developed city of Turkey during the 80s. And in the 80s, as Ayda said in the beginning, these years are important for Istanbul's being integrated to the global economy and becoming a global city. The industrial production was sent into different cities. International capital was attracted, and during 2000s, this became much more dominant, because the 2000s are at the same time the years where the economy of Turkey was growing, and this was perceived in the world. And the leading role of Istanbul became even more effective after 2000 as a global city and as a hub of new economic activities, and Turkey's economic growth was planned based on Istanbul. On the right side, you'll see the map which shows gross domestic product per person. This is the map we see for many years and without much change. On the contrary, Istanbul as a city region affecting the economy of the provinces in its west and east. The Ministry of Technology and Industry concluded a study which was the cascading of the centers of settlement, health, education, commercial relationships are in one hand, and there are other relationships which are independent from commercial relations. There they are making a network analysis with a new innovative approach, and the outcomes, the results of this network analysis say that Istanbul has strong commercial relationships between Ankara and Izmir. So the relations between these 3 metropolitan cities have become much stronger, and there is a dominancy. And if we ask what other relationships are there, we see Bursa, Kocaeli, and Tekirdağ. So this accumulation is proving the economies. Now, when we look at the gross domestic product per person, that production of Istanbul is related with population, but when we look at the gross domestic product per person, the situation is not different. Istanbul is still leading in the region. When you check the Turkish lira, there is an increase in economy, but with the effect from the exchange rate, Turkey is going through an impoverization process. And this is affecting the whole provinces, all of the provinces and the whole region. And in the meantime, some of the provinces inside the city, the city is away from the axis of industrial concentration, is remaining behind the average of the region and even Turkey. While the economy was growing, what happened about the distribution of the benefits? This is a very comprehensive question, but the first thing that comes to mind is the inequalities. First of all, the provinces inside the region have different levels of revenues, and they were affected. This box graphs that you see tell us this. Yes, in terms of Turkish lira, there's an increase in the income per person, but the differences within the region is going up. So as the height of the graphs is going up, the inequalities are also growing. There are some cities which are excluded, like Istanbul, and we see that those are going higher. Istanbul, Kocaeli, and Tekirdağ is following them, trying to get close to them. And in the region, some provinces like Edirne and Düzce are being excluded from the bottom side. So it's not only about the differences of income. It doesn't make any sense that these are differences in income, but it's also important how that income is shared and distributed inside the community. As far as I know, there is a limit of data, restriction of data, and if we consider the data of Turkey, this gives us an idea. It's before, of course, the pandemic has deepened these inequalities. But before the pandemic, according to data of 2020, G coefficient has gone up by 0.41. So the 7% who is receiving the top part of the income is receiving 47% of the income. The development is not only evaluated by economic indicators. When we check the studies, living quality and happiness research is taking place, but there is something else which is known, which is the UNDP Human Development Index. That was done at the level of cities, provinces at some point, but for the most recent period, we lacked that information for Turkey. There were three main components: revenue, education, and health. And when we look at them as an integrated index, some cities in the region like Yalova, Düzce, Sakarya are remaining below the Turkey's average. So there is not only an inequality of income, but along with that, there is a decrease in the human development. When you describe it that way, some provinces are lagging behind. Now, we check these sectors with location coefficient. The region is actually presenting us with an economic diversity. On one side, this is an advantage because in Turkey, in terms of both population and economic production, it has a big share, but it's also important to provide us with that diversity. As you know, during 1990s, the new ways of industry in Anatolia grew very rapidly, but never Marmara Region's leading role in Turkey as a production basin. This situation has never changed. And therefore, This study, this analysis was made based on years, but I'm not presenting them all. I'm only presenting the most recent period. What does this show us? Istanbul as a whole is the single and only hub of the region. What are the important sectors? IT, finance, real estate, culture, and art. The industry is still important in Istanbul, and there is a significant number of industrial workforce, and the ratio is not very low, but the other sectors are also coming to the forefront, and the industrial intensification density of Istanbul is in the east and west axis, including Bursa. And for this reason, these are important industrial areas for the region. There is also another important industrial density. What are we producing in which sectors? Of course, we can check the subsectors, but briefly here we are checking and asking the question about their levels of technology. What we see is, in particular, Kocaeli and Bursa has medium and high-tech expertise. However, Tekirdağ has both high-tech and low-tech manufacturing sectors. And this tell us something about the structure of those cities. And on the other hand, in the region, in the western cities, which are in the periphery, like Edirne, Balıkesir, and Çanakkale cities, agriculture, mining sectors are still available, and there is a specialization in those sectors. And in addition to that, there is a specialization in tourism and trade. Now, in the course of last 20 years, you have 2 minutes remaining. Would you please wrap up so that we can allocate more time for the discussion? Okay, then I'm going to skip my last bit of the presentation for the future. Now, the special reflection of all those changes. This shows a pattern like this, and that shows that the footprints of the metropolitan city is expanding and intensifying. The economic diversity in the region increased the importance of the peripheric cities, in particular in relation to the issue of food and water. These regions become more important, and the emerging sectors of new economy and high-tech sectors again in the dominant intensification areas in the region, and this is also increasing the inequalities within the region. This is in fact about the sectoral investigation of Marmara region, and this graph is analyzing the increase in employment. When we look at the all of the Marmara region, this is the case, but when we break this data into sub-regions and provinces, we have an opportunity of interpreting the now data. This is giving us an overall idea about Marmara region. The manufacturing sector is still very intensive in the region. In addition to that, we have transport, storage, trade, tourism activities are effective. However, in the region, the dominancy of Istanbul is demonstrated by the sectors of IT and finance. Even though they have a small share, both in terms of specialization and in the increase of employment, these sectors are growing rapidly. So this is giving a general idea for the region. And this kind of data and analytic approach should be evaluated with the actors of the region. On the first MARUF session in Play Marmara, in the special session of the mayors, I have added the visions of the mayors so that we can create a ground for discussion and open a new questioning area. If we rethink for Marmara, these blue boxes are the problems that could be identified so far for Marmara region, how we can open up those questions. The first one is the economic growth, how long it will continue, what are the limits of growth. We need to discuss this in particular while we are discussing the new economic models, and we have so many environmental problems on the agenda. This is one of the most critical aspects. Secondly, the advantages of the accumulation, both in terms of population, the effectiveness of Marmara region is still going up, and we still talk about the advantages of accumulation. But is this really the case, or Marmara region, is it using the advantages of this accumulation based on other cities? Can we discuss this issue from middle-scale cities? The competition subject was the magical word of 1980s, but where do we arrive at the end of this competition? And now, instead of competitive advantages, the collaborative advantages should replace them in all of the Marmara region. How can we open it up for discussion at the local and regional level? And finally, central and monolithic policies. How can we change those policies in a way to meet the local needs of the regions? And for this, the Marmara Union of Municipalities can be a modern pioneer, and they have certain approaches of solution-oriented.
And governance method, which is governance model, which is based on cooperation. Actually, thank you very much. We have to think of certain things while establishing the future of Marmara. We have to look at these 4 issues. And I hope that we will have time and we will have the chance to discuss those. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ayhan Polat right now. You have 15 minutes, and he's going to talk about the changing boundaries and borders. Please, sir. First and foremost, thank you very much, Ayda Hanım. I'll start for saying welcome, and I'd like to thank MARUF family for involving us into this family, and I'd like to wish success. Today, I think I shared my screen. I will tell you certain things about the Southern Marmara example. Why Southern Marmara? Because in 2019 and 2020 we have a joint activity with the Southern Marmara Development Agency, and it is beyond the regional planning. It's the socio-economic plan, and there are special pillars of this one. It was the revision of the regional plan, and I was the executor, and with a large team we tried to finish this within 1 year. Change of regional planning and the borders is the heading of my presentation. I'd like to refer to Professor Dr. İlhan Tekeli. As you know, the territorial size and in terms of all the relations, for the planning, there is the lack of peace of mind for the planner. And in planning, for the ones with planning, urban planning, there is This one, when there is in terms of when we address this lack of peace, there is the language problem and borders problem. I will tell you what is the problematic. I'll make an analogy, and I can say that the language could be a problem with the communication, or there could be a problem in the nerves when it comes to the borders. There are such risks. So I'll tell you through the Southern Marmara, but in order to look at this as regional, we need to have a new planning the language, a new methodology, and a new type of building plan is required. So there needs to be a new plan based on the special plans, and within this process, there's language, which is the language of planning. And the planners have scientific, disciplinary, and technical language, and there's the vocational jargon and the vocational language. And of course, there is the special representation and schematization. And we see chronochromatic from chronotypology, time and spatial dimension is taken into account. You know, for the region and the urban areas, it's always explained to be with the language. The higher you get, there are more complex relations, and there's more simplification of the language. But there are the borders, of course. When we look at these borders, there are administrative, management related legal boundaries, and natural, geographic, geometric, and ethnographic ones, and there are the invisible ones, the de facto borders. And we saw that our lack of peace increased. When we look at this, it wasn't enough to look at the southern Marmara. When we gather together the plans, there is a language that cannot be read. When we look at the language, there is a conflict, a cohesion, or this is a cohesion fusion problem. What we are trying to do is that with Güney Marmara, Çanakkale, and Balıkesir, as Turan Bey pointed out, within these 13 provinces, of course, there will be new indicators, and we have to address this with the different parameters. And if we are going to revise the regional plan, we have to look at the position of the regional plan. As you can see, if you show it to someone who is not a specialist, you see that there's a language which cannot be read. The boundaries and the regions are together. However, if there is any holisticity, and this it's not possible for you to give answer with the chromatic. The scope was very large, 2 million population, 32 districts, and we defined parameters for each area. And there is normative SMP strategy, special planning pattern was conducted. And this is how we wanted to have the integration. There are 7 concepts, as you can see. I will not go into details, but the main methodologic design is based on 3 pillars. One is about the positioning, how they're positioned, and there are some analysis for that. The second one is where is the most suitable place, and the third one is about the defining the functional area borders in the right manner. As a result of this design, there are 4 method with 4 methods was formed: social and economic systems. So we had a correlation, and we said that there are 13 qualitative analysis. The analysis what we have to do. There is a functionality analysis, there is a wrong size analysis, or the population impact analysis, clustering analysis, and there was a circuit analysis, and we tried to establish this correlation. And as a result of that, there will be two set of indicators, qualitative and quantitative, and for us they become data sets, thousands of data sets. And of course we use the GIS and smart technologies and other digital technologies, and we saw that the system is changing than from what is seen by us. The chromatic analysis is with four centers. It's like a leaf with 4 parts. You can think that this is an area of infinity. All the analysis, the region and the regional analysis, and also the constructor structure and paraphrased and analysis and semiotic analysis and synthesis were gathered, and there are more than 300 graphics and schemes, and then they turn into thousands of pages. This is the important issue, is the centralization. We need to act whether with 4 centers or 1 center, and we provided microform alternatives, and based on the scenario and integrated with the regional plan, there is integrated evaluation. There's a circuit analysis, and within this one there's attraction analysis and clustering analysis. All the analysis was made through this system. I will not show them all to you. What is the hierarchical relations of the region? And of course, you can see the clustering analysis and attraction analysis. So we try to design that. According to Juran method, Juran method is about the graphic, and look at we made all the analysis, and we tried to have a synthesis, integrated synthesis. There, for centrality, there were some scores based on the functions, and we made some calibrations, and of course that the system was based on the data, and there is and for Çanakkale and Balıkesir there are 3 locking structures in microform analysis, and we saw that with the 3 keys they can be solved, and for this we made some analysis. So as a result, in order to make an integrated evaluation, everything gathered together, there is a chromatic schematization is made. What I'm trying to say, sorry, I'm going too fast because this is there's too much effort which cannot be fit in 15 minutes time. It's about the making the boundaries better. The sizes were then defined, and transportation, and for the subregions and network relations. So we think that the region can be understood in the chromatic scheme, and for the analysis we worked on this. The change of the region, change in the boundaries, and also the relations of district with the provinces were tried to be understood. We made a new evaluation. The regional plan is made from the start, and from the end there was a circuit analysis. And of course at this stage you have 2 minutes. Could you please wrap up? There is crossfit synthesis, and with that we look at why there is a change in the boundaries, and also how the system should be. And there is the regional plan revision that we have. As I pointed out, we use the circuit analysis. We look at the current spatial relations, and at the same time strategic spatial development scheme. And with the, when we think it with the chromatic, we think that it is very different, and with the certain relations we are confronting. There is a change of language, there is a change of boundaries, but there are 7 main phenomena. It made us go in this way. One is the descriptiveness, the second one is explanativeness, and the third one innovation and creativeness, and explorative, being explorative. And this is something needed, and of course the normativeness. When you gather all these together, so of course for a special planning and sub-regional planning, we looked at the Southern Marmara example. I published it in 2 books, and if you want to go into details, you can take this. I think that I use the time effectively. Thank you very much.
It's a very detailed work, and actually after the break we will have a chance to monitor, to watch the works. The urban planning history is one of the subjects that should be discussed, and on one hand we need to talk very long time. However, we do not have very long time for this discussion. Hopefully at the end of the session we will find a chance to say a few words. Now I would like to turn to Ms. Özlem Altınkaya, Genel. The floor is yours. Professor, I have been working on Marmara Region for the last 10 years. This was initiated together with my PhD dissertation, but for the first time I'm making a presentation on a historical perspective, and for this reason I would like to thank MARUF team and Samet Bey for the invitation. I have a PhD which was published in 2012. This year in February, in 2018, a record has been published, and in today's presentation this was published in Marmara Journal as a small-scale paper. You can have access to all of those 3 publications from the internet. The history of a region can be written in different ways. Today, I'm going to see from the perspective of urban planners, and I'm going to explain and focus on the perspective of urban planners. And this border issue, maybe this is the last thing to say, but I'm showing it in the very beginning. So, because other participants talked about this, after the year 2000, Marmara region was divided into certain regions, subzones. But before that, there was a geographical Marmara region without administrative validity. So what's the meaning of this change of borders? Does it cause any differentiations? We need to discuss this subject from very many different dimensions. And how do I describe Marmara region? In this conference, in previous sessions, this has been discussed several times, and previous participants have made their own definitions, and my definitions are consistent with the previous one. In SS1 region, if we consider SS1 region, 96,000 square kilometer is the area, and the population is around 27.3 million people, which is like about one third of the population of Turkey. So this is the geographical area that we are talking about. Inside it, we have very developed urban areas and industrial areas. In terms of the land use and the land scale, there is an incredible geographical diversity, and these are all together, and they are overlapping and actually conflicting dynamics, we can say. And the region has a very long history. Here, throughout this long history, this subject has studied upon. This is maybe an area that requires much more in-depth studies. Mustafa Atlı has a dissertation on the economy of Marmara region, and Cemal Kafadar is defending that this should be improved, and he has a dissertation which he himself says that there are shortcomings, because we know that Istanbul, being the capital city, is as a result of a trying process. But today I would like to leave behind this long history, and I will start with the Republican era. As far as I can find, this is the first regional scale plan. My goal is the history and the macroeconomic history, which was framed by Professor Ayda in the beginning, and my presentation is overlapping with these periods. The first large-scale plan was made by Martin Wagner in the 30s, and this is called the sketch for the hinterland of Istanbul. In the middle of 1930s, this is the plan of Istanbul, and this is almost simultaneous, but between two approaches, there is a difference. Henry Prost is giving more importance to the beauty and aesthetic and urban design for the city. So we can say that there are very many differences. The research of Wagner, however, for Marmara region, and in particular in the vicinity of Istanbul, he focuses on agricultural production, population management, recreational areas, infrastructure networks, and he identifies three main types of settlement. One is the core area of Istanbul, and later comes the narrow hinterland of Istanbul, the province region, and then Marmara region, and this is called the larger hinterland of Istanbul. According to Wagner, Istanbul University creates central forces, and this is causing the decrease of a population in the hinterland of Istanbul. When this study was conducted, these geographical regions were not clarified. The geographical regions were identified in the 1941, the first Congress of Geography, and how these borders were identified has been clearly explained in this report, if you are interested. The second plan that we have encountered is the Cincinnato plan, starting from the end of 1950s, which continued during the 60s. It's the plans of Istanbul and Marmara region. Here, Istanbul is being connected to the regional scale. An important characteristics of this plan is the decentralization is being encouraged, as you can see at clusters here, and this is made on a spine on the road, which also includes the bridge, and it's on the basis of the satellite cities around Istanbul. When we come to 1960s, here in the regional works, there's an increase of interest. This is not only from these plans, and we can see it from other plans. The important geographers of this era, for example, Tümertekin, wrote articles and papers, and they have also their own works and studies on this subject. This period, an important plan covering the Eastern Marmara region in 1963. This is an integral, holistic study. This plan is rather about the northeastern coast of Marmara region. Industrial corridor is developing. So when we think of it, we can see how old this industrial corridor is dated back to the old times, and this did not come very sudden. So this is planning a rapid development of industry, and in order to decrease the pressure of urbanization, centers are being foreseen in this sub-region. And for the first time, the first organized industrial zone is being recommended and proposed. This plan is guiding the future small-scale plans. It's not an implemented study. There's another important dimension of this plan. This recommends a regioning starting from Istanbul and Eastern Marmara entry towards the Thrace and the Western Marmara region. Here, towards the end of the 60s, checking the village surveys, Murat Güvenç developed a visualization technology, and our findings is verifying this sub-regioning. And actually, this is the bigger picture. What was the central Marmara, and how valid is this data? Here, I believe these characteristics of the rural regions are important, and at the end of the 60s, in the Thrace region, in particular in the southern Marmara, social equipments and infrastructure investments are not benefited from by many villages, and this is showing us a different face of the region. Afterwards, the regional works were declining very suddenly. In between, there's a diamond plan, but it's not an exactly regional plan. In 1965, Istanbul City Planning Office carried out a metropolitan study, and from this region downsizing to the metropolitan area, actually there is a change of point of interest. Architect and planner Turgut Cansever, in particular in this period, was criticizing this change. Afterwards, now I am jumping to the 2000s. I did not take into consideration the plans in between. In the aftermath of 2000, an important plan is Istanbul Province Environmental Arrangement Plan. With the revision, it was implemented between 2006 and 2009. In this plan, Istanbul's metropolitan area and Marmara region interactions are being taken into consideration, and this is indicating certain corridors and access. Afterwards, after the end of 2000s, the picture is becoming more complicated. As it has been said by previous speakers in this conference, there is a fragmentation and change of administrative borders, and in IBSS 2 plan, the regional development agencies came to here, and they have plans for 2023-2024. But Professor Erkan mentioned the problems of coordination among those development agencies. There is another point which is as important, and here you see the infrastructure investments and mega projects in this region. The majority of them are inside the provincial borders of Istanbul, but here the interregional characteristics are also influenced by some new highway projects and bridge projects being implemented, and new harbor areas were made, and there were some infrastructure investments like Melan project. And we believe that in our paper, which was published this year, this special change, the transformation or shift between rural and urban areas, we try to understand. What does it show to us at a regional scale? With regards to global sustainability, what does it mean? For example, one of our indicators is on the line between Kocaeli and Sakarya, the rural areas, which are called scroll, is going up, and this is actually corresponding to the earthquake fault and earthquake belt. And actually, we want to be mistaken. This is not an exactly economic development region. Why there is such an expansion we have identified here? There are certain questions that needs to be answered in order to understand the dynamics of the region. So there are so many questions. By the way, I'm about to come to the end of my presentation. So here the urban and rural areas are interrelated. On IBSS 1 borders, we cannot understand these hybridizations, and for this reason an urgent collaboration is necessary. In particular, the situation of the Marmara Sea was problematic, and we recommended an urgent collaboration, and the mucilage which followed that verified this recommendation. And finally, these are my own publications that I have mentioned in the beginning. This is my dissertation, my publication in 2018, and the paper which was published in 2021. Thank you very much, Özlem. Yes. You can stop screen sharing. So we have watched 3 very important presentations which are very broad, and actually for the region, what kind of dynamics are available, how we can understand them, how we can broaden our knowledge, and how we can discuss them in line with the actions of the past and the reflections of the policies of the past could be used. Now, I would like to see if there are any questions. At the moment, I see no questions. If that's the case, if we have no questions from the audience, We still have 10 minutes more. And actually, based on these distinguished studies, we can ask each speaker to use 2-3 minutes on how to approach Marmara region and what could be the priorities of a new approach. So I'm gonna ask them to use the floor once again and to share with us their opinions. Ferhan, we can start with you. Actually, thank you very much, Professor. In my final PowerPoint slide, I was actually going to talk about this, but I didn't have time. So the first one is economic analysis. This dominant position of Marmara region will continue. This is inevitable, but what we always say for the years, solving the problems of the cities or regions inside is not very much possible. All around the country, the regions and the city policies are all important. Of course, different focal points are developing. We cannot claim that nothing is changing, but in particular in Marmara region, there is a limit to the growth which is being discussed for a long time in the world. In 1972, there was a study which was published 5 times within 1 year. So it's not a recent topic. For the last 50 years, we are discussing the limits of the growth. Now we see more of those problems, and we need to significantly consider this. And there was a session about Play Marmara Sea in the scope of MARUF. Marmara Sea should be protected as a basin. If this is realized, this is going to change everything and all the things which have been memorized. But it's not very easy to formulate the framework of the practice and implementation. But this is indeed very critically important. In the meantime, there are certain trends in the world. There's an economic transformation. This is not only imposed by EU. This is the green agenda. You have underlined that, but along with that, there is an issue of transformation which came with the pandemic, but these are all carried out by the centers, and this is going to increase the existing inequalities. How can we find solutions to them? And also, there are some resources of the growth. The new economic model is the cycle economy, a circular economy, and we have started to discuss this circular economy issue. This should be more important for Marmara region. There is a second subject which is about the advantages and disadvantages of accumulation. It seems that there are more advantages because the population keeps growing. This region is attractive. Bursa mayor asked this question: what's the reason why everybody wants to live in Istanbul or Bursa? Actually, we need to create other cities all over Turkey, and specifically for Marmara region, the middle scale cities, access to services and livability should be studied in a serious sense. And there is also an issue about central policies. The strengthening of the local cannot be resolved only by delegating power. We all know and discuss about this. The local government should be able to create its own resources, and it's very important that they develop capacity. And I believe medium scale cities are expected to become more and more important in the future. I believe they had been neglected and we were giving meaning to certain things based on metropolitan cities, but maybe it's time that we give more importance to medium-scale cities, and I just wanted to take note of that. Lastly, as I said in the end of my speech, Marmara Union of Municipalities, in order to develop this cooperation, strengthening the local governments in Marmara Region and working in a collaboration to recommend alternatives for solution and to become a pioneering model, we need to discuss them in this platform, and we need to find a way of getting out of this circle. Thank you very much, Ferhan. Now we have 4.5 minutes, very short time, but there's a question for Professor Erkan. Balıkesir is the city where Treasury has the highest amount of land. Is there any problem about this? Professor Erkan, you have 1 or 2 minutes to respond to this question. That's the only time we have. Was this question posed to me? Yes, it was. I could not exactly understand. The treasury land is a lot in Balıkesir, so does it create any problem? Now, I will not go into the political response because we know that it's an issue, it's a problem. And after the post-pandemic politics, we have clearly seen that in order to use my time efficiently, city regions, global cities like Istanbul, competitiveness in the global environment and the backyards of Istanbul, and there are 13 cities together with Istanbul, and they are ensuring 50% of the revenues. They are deciding on the elections. You are talking about all the opportunities, the attractiveness of the city is here. But in this age of Anthropocene age, we as planners who are trying to make plans, this is the most difficult era. For in 3,000 years, we made cities for 3 billion people, but we are expected to do this for the next 30 years, and population is going up very rapidly. In such a time, trying to plan the territories and making decisions is very difficult. If we had longer time, I would say very long remarks, but I would like to leave the floor to Professor Özlem. I have expressed what I was about to say in my own presentations. There are 2 points that I would like to underline. The ecologic perspective should be urgently carried to the highest point. And we have seen it from the wildfires and the mucilage problem. If we do not take action, there is no way out, and it will happen anyway. For this reason, we need an integrated planning understanding. The second point I would like to make is the training and education pillar. We need students, planners, architects who have an awareness and consciousness in this subject. For I personally perceived a non-willingness from the students. There's a need for a change of framework generally in the education, and this panel has been very much teaching for me, and I would like to thank you all. We thank you. Actually, we have a question to Professor Ferhan. There's a city which became a metropolitan city in 2014. The environmental plan is put into force very immediately. How can we explain it? If you can say 1 sentence, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, or I don't know why this question is asked to me. In 2014, it became a metropolitan city. Why they make a plan immediately and put it into action? Of course, our planning experiences, if we start discussing them, there will be no end to that. We have an experience of Bursa environmental plan. It was the year 2010, and the city needed a new constitution. We said it's lagging behind the dynamics, but in 2020, just 10 years after, the city, it was said that the city needs another constitution, so a new plan is coming into play. Unfortunately, the planning has relations with the politics, and we cannot neglect them. Why there is a need for planning? Of course, we say that as planners, we say that there's a need for plans, but when the timing is totally related with the politics. Actually, we have come to the end of our time. I would like to thank MARUF team for bringing these subjects about the region into the forefront, and under new circumstances, what kind of regional plans we are going to make. Discussing all of those issues is very important in my opinion, and in this session we have made an introduction to this, and I believe this kind of debates will be taking place in a broader sense in the future, and I would like to thank all the participants and the speakers, and I would like to once again thank to the organizers.